Let's talk about Claude, because this month I've used Claude to generate over $11,000 from one client. If we're not including the website, which was around $2,000 of that, it's close to $10,000 that didn't involve any code, and it was literally generating text and completing tasks in a number of different places. So first thing which we did was research. I had to identify a platform which would meet a client's needs, that could be white labeled, that would be multi-tenant, that had a number of requirements. And what Claude did was better than what I could find myself with Google. And once I'd identified 2 or 3 decent platforms that looked like they did the right thing, then I said to Claude, start looking at the documentation for each of these platforms and then cross-reference that to make sure that all of these requirements we've got actually are available. And then there was a number of questions which kind of came up about, are these actually essential features? And here's maybe some other things that we should think about. It was giving me questions which I was like, okay, let's send something back to the client which is going to ask them most of these things, and then what we found out already and some ideas which we have. So when I sent that back to the client, they responded to all the questions. Then what that allowed us to do then was it narrowed it down to one platform. And then it was a matter of, okay, does this platform 100% do all of these things? It looked like it did. So I said, okay, I'm going to make an account. And this was when I first used the Chrome MCP tool. So I was using it just in the sense that I'd not done it before and I wanted to see what the boundaries of it was like. So I asked it to double check that each of those features which it thought were in the documentation was actually correct. That's a pretty slow process. The Chrome MCP, for whatever reason, is really slow, but I wanted to see how it would actually work. Anyway, that was all fine. And I learned a lot about the Chrome MCP tool, and from that point on, I use it every single day for testing, for just completing tasks, for setting up the draft of a campaign, for just checking information. For example, checking Google Analytics information or Google Ads information, writing client reports. It's become a massive part of my workflow. So there's a lot of things there which made a good amount of money that I would say are highly leveraged tasks where I didn't actually need to spend that much time on them, but I was just orchestrating Claude. And at the same time, I was starting to use agent teams. So agent teams at the moment is an experimental feature that you need to enable. If you don't have it enabled, you can't use it in Claude at the moment. Instead of running sub-agents, you can use a team of agents which can work on Git work trees in parallel so that nothing that they do conflicts. They can communicate. They preserve the context window of the main session that you're in. And you can basically do more stuff. And what this then made me think about is, how do I decompose my tasks in such a way that I'm assigning work to individual agents that are going to work in parallel in such a way that they're not going to try and conflict, because then we can preserve the context in each of them so that they only work on what they need to do, nothing overlaps. This is decomposing the tasks. And this has brought me into more spec-driven development, which is a framework for, getting the most out of agents when you're coding stuff. It's a level above vibe coding. I've been playing around with that a lot, but continue down this route of actually most of the income I've generated this month. First of all of it's been using Claude. When Claude wasn't working the other day, I just closed my laptop and was like, I'm not even going to bother because it's just so slow and it keeps failing. There's just no point. I've reached that stage with Claude Psychosis that if it's down, I'm not even going to try and work, because I don't have something, you can say, oh, you're becoming too reliant on it. We're too reliant on everything. That isn't going to stop me from using it. And if I don't have this insanely powerful computer to do work for me, I'm not doing the fucking work. So I'm absolutely fine with that. And are they going to use that against us? You can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to use that against us. Okay? That's all this is. They're just trying to figure out how we can make everyone so dependent on this thing that, they rug pull us. Which is fine. As long as you use this thing to get as far ahead as you possibly can in the meantime. So I attended a talk because I helped someone in this co-working space to introduce him to Codex and how to vibe code. So we had a good chat and I was showing him some things which may be useful for him. Anyway, he knew the guy who was the manager at this co-working space that I've been at, and he just put me forward to join in this talk, which was the following Friday, where it was about AI. And the guy who I was with, who was also kind of leading this session, there was about 8 or 9 people. The co-work space gave us lunch and people were sat around and we were just talking, right? And it was interesting to just see people's different perspectives. There was everything from this guy's got a degree and is doing a master's degree in like cybersecurity and works for the London Stock Exchange, and he goes to the seminars of the top professors who are talking about the legal ramifications of this, right? There was that. Everything down to this lady has started using the Claude website. And when we said download Claude, like she had no idea what that even meant. Like, what do you mean download it? And then there's people saying, is the copyright side of it stealing? What about the environment? And then there's me that's just like, use this tool to save yourself before it completely takes over. Before you get replaced by this, you have to learn how to use this to get as far ahead as you possibly can. That's my approach to it. I don't think that I can do anything about the economy, the environment, the political landscape. I literally cannot do anything about any of that. The thing I can do to protect myself is to actually learn as much as possible whilst leveraging this tool, so that if I am replaced by it, at least I still have some value to add. Okay? My approach is to not glaze the AI hype cycle. You're looking at a multi-billion or trillion-dollar industry, which is insanely hyped up marketing, and everyone's trying to get involved in that. Everyone's trying to ride that wave. So all the information about it is absolutely sensationalized to the point that it grabs your attention. And if you're not careful, you're just going to go down rabbit holes that just completely waste your time. So I want to talk about the ways where I think it's useful. And I've not even read what this is said, but I've asked it to explain some of the use cases of Claude based on how I use it, but just not sharing any client names. So this thing gets me. Claude knows what I'm doing here. This is my Obsidian directory here. So CRM. Okay, I can say to Claude, what do I need to work on this week? It has all of the proposals. It knows all the jobs which are open. It knows everything which is in the process of being done. Like, it knows the communication style of the clients that I'm working with. It knows if they prefer WhatsApp or email. It knows how technical they are, so it can draft it in the tone that that person wants it. Obsidian is almost the database or the knowledge base of your Claude Code agent, if you want to call it that. I don't look at this as agentic. I look at it more like you're using an LLM, but you're giving it tools, you're giving it information, you're giving it more context. So I've actually restructured the way that I manage my files so that I can give it to Claude. And that was a bit of a restructuring process. So I've got like a client projects directory, which is referenced in the CRM. Each client has their own folder, and within that, it has everything from the actual code work, which I call apps, to deliverables, which might be proposals or research notes or just information which needs to be sent to the customer. This is the next point in this list, the client proposals. And this is where I can make proposals that are framed perfectly, right? There's no way I could do it better in a reasonable amount of time. This is the other thing. So I can just get more done and turning things into something which aligns with what the client's interested in. It has context of the correspondence between me and the client. It knows what we've done already. It writes it in Markdown, then it converts it into a PDF. Instead of me spending any time on that, Claude does it. And from one client in 1 month with just one Claude subscription, that's generated nearly $12,000. And the majority of that was not even code-related work. It was research. It was creating a demonstration using a platform that I'd never used before, one of these like CMS type systems that I had no idea how to use. And then I also had to write documentation for how they should use it. So I was using Claude Chrome MCP to do the work, but then write the documentation about how to do the work so that I can give them that as well. And then I just clicked through and made sure that it was right. I think the most useful tool that you can give it is the ability to get the type of information that you regularly need. So for example, I found that I was just always planning where I'm kind of on the move at the moment. I've moved out my flat. I'm going to Thailand next week. I've been on trains, buses, driving places. I've been doing a lot of travel. So I just gave it Google Maps, set up the Google Maps API on the cloud console. And now I can say, how long does it take? Or I need to make a plan. I've got to do all these things. Like what order should I do that in? And it can get that information for me reliably. It's not guessing. I think the most useful thing for myself is just tasks. And there's a number of MCPs that you could use for managing your tasks. I use Todoist, which works well with an MCP, and you can use that to, for example, if I just see issues on a site, like I'll just note them down in Todoist and then say, let's work on this list of stuff. I am figuring out some different ways to use that. For example, you could use Linear if you wanted to track issues and have other people submit issues as well. Or if you wanted to use Claude Cloud scheduled tasks, where it's going to, for example, check Sentry, look at the errors, submit issues. They could be GitHub issues or issues on Linear. And then, for example, I've just made a workflow called Triage, which looks at the list of issues for the project which I'm in, whether that's from Linear or Todoist or GitHub issues. I'm kind of experimenting to see what I think works well. Just from my perspective this month, the thing which has brought the most money has basically just been helping someone who's trying to solve a problem that's very valuable for them. So what they're willing to put into solving that problem is good. And then for me to be able to do it at that price, for it to be viable for me, for it to work within the time I have available, for the other commitments I have, using Claude has just made it easy, right? To the point where when I've had a call with this team yesterday, how are you guys feeling about moving forward? What are we waiting on? And Claude drafted that. And the guys were like, we need you in the meetings. Okay, we need you when we demo this next time because we can't do it as good as you can. And I'm not doing anything insanely special. Absolutely nothing. I've literally used Claude to just write the documentation and set this thing up for them, do the research. Obviously, I've looked at it and verified it and made sure that things are right and that it aligns with what they want. They haven't asked me to do something and I've gone and done something completely different. Like, I've delivered what they needed, but I've also helped them define what they need. And then I've produced something which is aligned with that, which was valuable and opened up other questions to kind of expand what they're doing to be more valuable to them. And this is why they've said, actually, we want you to be more involved And this is the one which has produced nearly $12K in the last month. So I think from my perspective, what would I do moving forward to make money with AI is talking to people about what problems they're facing, and then positioning myself as someone who understands problems and is able to use the best tools available to mitigate those problems or produce a result, deliver something of value. And that does not need to be code. It really doesn't. At the moment, I'm using Claude Code for my self-assessment, and I'm giving it CSV files for bank statements. I'm not saying trust this thing with your life and trust it with all of your tax planning, but at the same time, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to file a tax return. I've been using this to do research, and I've realized that one of the best ways to do research is using these agent teams. So I'd never been paid to do research before this task this time, because actually I'd been paid once, and I realized that it was actually a relevant step to basically deliver better value, right? And it was the same type of research both times. It was, I've got this thing that I want to do. Should I make this software myself, or should I use an existing platform? 9 times out of 10, there's going to be a platform that exists. The first time it was someone who wanted to do a yoga community, and I found that we should use Circle. And what's the best one? What's the price? How easy is it to set up? Is it something they can use on their own after I've configured it? Those are the kind of questions. Now, the reason someone would pay me for that is not because they couldn't do it themselves. It's because they know that I'm going to look into those other things. For example, is this going to be something they can use on their own afterwards? Do they need hand holding all the time? Is this a system that they can learn? Addressing the concerns of that person. And this is the thing where I do include a lot of information like that in my CRM. What's their communication preference? How technical are they? Because then I know what to offer them, right? Someone who wants a Framer website, which is like a drag and drop interface where you can train someone on how to use the CMS in 20 minutes, for a team that doesn't want to have to use a developer every time they want to make a change, that's relevant to them. Whereas a team that wants, or a company that wants something very specific, has like a super technical process that they need done, okay, you're going to need to make the thing with code. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, there's going to be all these weird workarounds and like all this hackiness. Okay, but then there's the technical overhead of having a system like that. And this is the thing where what is valuable to someone is very dependent on a number of things. For example, I've got a guy on a retainer, and we're working on improving his local presence on Google. And at the moment, I'll use Claude Code to make a report. And when I've sent this guy reports, he's like, mate, this literally makes no sense to me. This is the details I care about. Fine. Note that down. And now that's how his reports come, okay? Because we know his communication preference. And I think you need to ask, and you need to get to that point with people pretty quick, like what are they actually after here? Because you could spend a lot of time crafting some really detailed thing that they're going to look at and be like, I don't even understand this. I mean, I did ask this. So I didn't ask this question about making money. I think I asked it afterwards. But you can see these other things. Task orchestration, like I wanted to get earlier today, I wanted to get a list of all of my active subscriptions, what's in my pipeline, and then I'm looking at my self-assessment. So I'm using it to get like a complete picture of my financial situation, personally and in business, and then also looking at the tasks I've got to do this week, because I'm going to Thailand in a few days, Saturday this week, today's Tuesday. So I've got a couple of things that need to be done at home. I've got a couple of things which need to be done in my work. And it has the reference of what client has what tasks outstanding, what am I going to say, what can I do first. And earlier it was like, I downloaded a thing for an eSIM, paid for my travel insurance. Like, what can I do in 10 minutes? Okay, these couple of things, get them done off the list. And this is where I'm saying use it in this way where you're feeding it the right information for the stuff that you need to do. So for example, if you're getting some overview of the money for the business side, that was with Stripe. For the personal side, it was bank statements I exported as CSV files. And then the tasks, it uses Todoist. And then it's also referencing my notes. So it knows all the details about my trip, when my flight is, how far it is for me to get to the airport. Like literally everything that I could possibly need to know, this thing knows as well. And then the other thing is like the communication style preference that people have for when I'm going to send them an update about what days I'm not going to be available because I'm traveling. So I've not even read this yet, but let's look at the Claude Code operator, positioning as a Claude Code operator. So you're not selling AI, you're compressing operational capacity. So I think this is basically a fancy way of saying you're helping someone do something which would take them lots of time or something which they're not capable of doing, and you're using these tools. So even the thing of just writing the report for the Google ads, and you've got to pull in Facebook ads, the GA4 Google Analytics data, like there's so many things that you could look at, and then combining all that information and then producing a report is very useful just to get an overview of what the situation is. Or being able to say, so I've got this thing where I'm using NanoClaw. NanoClaw is like OpenClaw, got some different benefits, and it's essentially a Claude agent that's running, and then mine's in Telegram. So I can schedule a task so that I could create a report for the day of what needs to be done. But this is where like that's not that useful, because now it's just giving me loads of text, right? Every day it's just telling me this and that. What I find it useful for is like I tell it stuff and it does something with that information. Whether that is adding it to my journal, or it's creating a plan, or it's doing further research, or it's creating a task list. But when I sit down at my desk and I want to know, what do I need to do today? If I was going to look at where that information is spread across, it's a lot of different places. It could be my messages, it could be my Todoist, it could be linear issues. I want to combine all of that into just one place. And that is something, the reason I'm even making this is because I spoke to someone in the co-work about this the other day. We went out for lunch. This guy's got an e-com brand, and I was showing him what I'm using NanoClaw for, and he was like, mate, like, I need this so that it's like your second brain, but it connects to all the right places. Like, for example, he's running a team of people, and a lot of times they'll have meetings with different vendors, or this might be a warehouse person, or this might be the shipping person, or this might be a designer. And then he's got to take that information, think about what it connects to, like, okay, we needed to speak to the supplier so that we could arrange with the warehouse what date that's going to be there. And he's like a middleman. So he's like a bottleneck that he's like triaging all of these issues. And we were kind of speaking about how he just copies and pastes stuff from ChatGPT's website. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's what you would have done 3 years ago. That just doesn't make any sense. Like, that has no access to your calendar, your meeting notes, your emails. Like, it doesn't know who's on your team. And then he's putting stuff in ChatGPT, and he was like, it says my memory's full. What does that even mean? And I've been trying to think about, actually the work, because I was chatting to this guy and he was like, I thought you said you were a web designer. And I was like, yeah, I do make websites, but actually, now that I think about it, most of the work I'm actually doing and most of my revenue is actually coming from just me directly using AI in different ways. And the one that I described, it has been really good, but I've been using it like this for a while. but I'm now starting to see where I can really add the most value. And I'm seeing that it's like slightly different for each person, right? So the plugins which this guy may need in his system, think of it as like his control panel for his company. The tools which he might need are completely different to the tools I might need. Okay, he's having lots of meetings on Zoom and stuff like that where there's actionable items that are coming from each of those meetings, and there's tasks for team members to follow. And he's not using a team task manager like Jira or Asana or something like that, because no one on the team's got time to manage it. And I was like, yeah, but so you're just manually managing that, right? You're emailing these people, you're messaging them, telling them what they need to do. He was asking me like, could you help us with this? And I was kind of like, I am still figuring this out myself, especially this second brain personal AI. Like, I run into loads of errors with it. So I would say that the way I do it is not necessarily the way I would recommend someone else to do it. So for example, I would definitely recommend him or someone who doesn't want to get into the weeds with Claude Code to just use Claude Cowork and just connect up some of the relevant things, like for example your Google Drive and your Gmail or something like that. And this is kind of what this is saying, right? Building a business operations system that lives in a simple format. And this is what he says he's been doing. This was the first thing this guy kind of mentioned, is formalizing all of these SOPs and the ways he wanted people to respond in different situations. So when his team asks questions, they've got SOPs. Okay, this is kind of like the first level of that, in the same sense that I've outlined the way that I would create a new website and what information I would need. Okay, it's not something I need to think about all the time. The way that I report stuff to clients, that's a process, that's a system, that's automated. Let's look at this next bit. Processing meeting notes into actions, managing pipelines, generating reports, keeping systems current. This is the kind of thing that people actually spend a lot of time on that gets overlooked because they're just busy in the weeds with things. What it felt like to me was that the guy he was working with didn't really want me to position myself as the one who could do this, because it kind of invalidated his role. And that was why I didn't try and push it to them, because I just thought it was a waste of time, because I found that this particular person was trying to disagree with a lot of what I was saying. And this is a guy who his role or his positioning is probably very similar, that he's supposed to help the owner work on the high level side of things rather than being in the weeds. And then when this guy's seeing what I've got, the owner's seeing what I've got, he's kind of like, this is what I need. Yeah, I let them guys figure that out for themselves and they can figure out how to use Claude. But this is the other thing. At the moment, there is definitely a gap between someone who knows they should be using AI to someone who actually uses AI for most of their work. And then the people who have like no technical ability at all, like they still need someone to do this for them. Like I have so many people that ask me to do things that they would just not be able to do it themselves. It would take them too much time, or they're just doing it, but it's just taking them days and they need a solution which takes them a few hours. And this is where I can add value for people. And this is why I'm thinking how to formalize this process myself to get better results within my own work, and then be able to replicate that as a system for other people. Because at the moment, there's a gap for people who can make web apps with code using AI, because soon anyone will be able to do that. You won't even see any of the layers of it will be abstracted into a chat, right? Or it will just look at what are you interested in based on your social media and then design a business for you, right? so that you don't have to write the code, you don't have to think about the pricing, you don't have to research it. But at the moment, someone who can connect those things and still produce something valuable, it's highly profitable to be that person. And I know this firsthand because at the moment I'm that person for a couple of people. I'm now thinking, how do I take this to the next level and figure out what people want at this next level? Because you'd be surprised what people would pay for this stuff. So I've got someone at the moment, they're paying nearly $1,000 a month for a software that I think I can turn into a multi-tenant version of it. So I'm basically being paid to solve all of the problems for this particular customer with the goal in mind to use that as a template to solve the same problem for other people as well. And if this one's 1,000 and it still feels a bit cheap, what can it be? How much can this actually go to? And this is why I'm saying that this isn't all going to be code. Some of it's going to be code and some of it's not. And I think getting familiar with all of these systems is not only useful to a new gap is created by these changes in the market that you can easily slot yourself in. Because I've reached this point where even if something is the first time I've done it, I'm confident enough to figure it out and still deliver something professional and put my seal of approval on it, that you can trust that this thing's going to work, even if I've not done it before. A prime example of that might be I set something up which was a podcast generator. So it reads the news from Perplexity. I think I've given this away before for free. Originally it was using N8N. So this is a typical thing where it sounds like, oh, I've never done this before, you shouldn't be charging for that. Okay, if I waited to do the thing first before I could charge for it, like I wouldn't have made any money, right? This was literally how I got into AI. Someone asked me to make a web app. They wanted a meme generator and they paid me nearly $4,000 to do this thing. And it literally took me a day. And this was back when I was copy pasting from Claude into VS Code. And I literally said to the guy, mate, I've not done that before. And he's like, I don't care. Can you get it done in a day? Yeah, all right. And that was when I was like, I need to figure this out so that I can do that repeatedly. So I've been in that realm where I've been charging or being paid good amounts of money for stuff I've never done before. And it's not in the sense that like I'm doing work where like someone's whole livelihood depends on it. Because this is something else, right? I'm not dealing with critical national infrastructure. I was making meme coin websites. They don't care if it doesn't work after they stop working on it, right? They just don't care. And, you know, there's everything in between. For example, another one recently was someone wanted a website and they'd been working with a previous web designer and they were like, it came to the point where I was like, okay, have you got the pictures? And they were like, so all the pictures are just in this chat with this guy on WhatsApp. Can you just get them out of this chat? And I was like, at first, my brain was just like, no, obviously not. Obviously, I'm not going through this WhatsApp chat to get these images and what they are, because they had descriptions and stuff as well. I was like, no, absolutely not, in my mind. But then I thought for a sec, maybe Claude can do that. Maybe I can get her to export this chat from WhatsApp. Claude, can you export chats in WhatsApp? Yeah. Okay, cool. And then it literally just did it. And it took 5 minutes. So for the level of website that was, like, that was not going to be something that I could have spent a lot of time on. So it allowed me to do something. Like, and then I got her to look at the pictures. Are these right? Because it was a hairdresser and bold, so I'm not familiar with like the names of different hair treatment services. You know, does it look okay? She's like, yeah, it looks perfect. So just because you've not done something doesn't mean that you can't do it to a good standard. And then the other thing that I did recently was someone was like, I've got this example of a contract that was kind of like a form. So they had an example of a form and then they had a load of text. And this text had to fit on an A4 sheet. just because it was going to be a physical piece of paperwork that was part of their daily business stuff. Can you use this to sort this out for me? Okay, fine, yeah. How much are you looking to pay for this? Because it was just my mate. He's like, I don't know, 50 quid. So I said, okay, fine. Using these details into a PDF. I'm like, hold on. Let's make this with HTML. And then let's convert that HTML into a PDF. So using this image, make a HTML document to replicate this so that then we could edit it, right? You could do the same thing with a normal Word document, but HTML I thought was a little bit better for this. And then let's convert it into a PDF. Let's make sure that it fits on one page, that none of the text is skewed. But that took me about 20 minutes, sent it back to the guy. Is this all right? Does this look okay for what you need? And he's like, yeah, that's perfect. So am I vetting the legal terms of this contract? No, that's not my problem. He's got the text he wants on this thing. That's his prerogative. Like, it's got nothing to do with me. Have I done this before? No, I've never done this before. I knew that sometimes if you're trying to make a document, writing something in Markdown or HTML and then converting it into a PDF is a more predictable workflow, I find, than using like a docx Word document file. And so I've got absolutely no problem doing something for the first time and being paid good amounts for it.